this is a really important topic for the Toda project generally, is understanding how to take these different pieces apart so that we can get past this stage of monolithic systems, whether they're centralized or blockchains. They're monolithic with respect to the assets that are created and maintained inside of those systems. And what I mean by that is, as Ben said, they are managing the consensus layer, they're managing the state of those assets, and they're also managing the control over those assets. So if we think about an asset of any kind, we can really break it into these three pieces. Where is the integrity of that coming from? So what's enforcing its uniqueness, or the no double spend property? Typically in a distributed system, that's going to be some kind of consensus mechanism. So we've talked about proof of work, and we've talked about proof of stake, we've talked about Toda IP. Those are different ways of achieving integrity. There's going to be some kind of state management, because these assets need to be updated over time, right? So we need to be able to make an update to that thing. And then there's a question about where that state is managed. If we think about digital assets in a centralized system or on a blockchain, the answer is that that state is managed in the same place that is providing its integrity. Those two things are coupled together. And most blockchains do something that most centralized systems don't do, which is that they isolate the control factor. So with a blockchain-based asset, you would typically say that it can only be updated legitimately by someone who has the private key that matches some public key that's associated with that asset at this moment, right? And so the control has been isolated. If we contrast that with putting that asset into a centralized system, like just some database somewhere, the control for that is typically going to be in the hands of whoever's running that database. They can mutate that row in the database however they would like, or they can make an update however they would like. There's no restrictions around that, other than the fact that they keep everyone else out. The only way that you can interact with your assets on, in Facebook or whatever, or at your bank, the only way that you can interact with those digital assets is by going through the interface that they provide you. And they gatekeep you on that interface, but you don't really have the control of those assets. You don't have the control of updating them or not updating them. That's up to that gatekeeper. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so blockchain versus centralized, one of the big distinctions is that you can peel control off on the blockchain side and say, the only way to legitimately update this asset that you have there is if you have this private key. Of course, you could do the same thing on the centralized side. You don't have to have usernames and passwords for database systems. You could do public key-based updates in your centralized system. And that would be great. And more people should do that, because giving people control over their assets is important. But there's another thing that's important, which is giving people possession of their assets. So if you don't have possession of your asset, it's much like your asset is locked in a safety deposit box in a bank somewhere, right? And so to use it, you have to go to that bank, you have to take out your key, open up the safety deposit box. You can't take the asset out, but you can modify it. You can make some modifications. So now it's in my safety deposit box. And if I want to use it, I have to go to the bank and use my key and make these changes. It's a big heavyweight operation whenever you do something with an asset on the blockchain. And that's because it's in a bank. It's in the place that's providing the integrity for that thing. And so it's, they're really geared toward these high value use cases where you're trying to mitigate a bunch of risks around that integrity. And so it has the same kind of transactional dynamics that going into your bank and opening up your safety deposit box has. And that's not an accident. That's just that the state of that asset is permanently tied to where it was created, permanently tied to that bank. So what Toda files allow us to do, it's a representation for an asset. In the same way that JSON and XML are representations for data, a Toda file is a representation for a digital asset. And what it allows us to do is to peel apart these two layers that seem like they're stuck together, which is, where is the state being updated and how is the integrity being maintained? And it seems like these two have to be in the same place, that you can't separate them if we think about this, because how could we possibly know that the sequence of updates to the state of an asset that you were showing me is the same sequence of updates that you must be showing to Ben if that sequence of updates isn't stored in the place that's giving this its uniqueness, right? These two are very tightly coupled. But what the proof structure of a Toda file allows us to do is to separate them out so that actually I can give you a static proof. I can transfer a file to you, a Toda file to you. You can validate it without making any network calls. And having done that, you know that the sequence of updates for this asset, the state of this asset, has the same integrity, the same uniqueness as if it were in this system up here where it originated. So you can take it out of that system, represent it as a Toda file, pass it to me, I can make modifications to it, and I can prove to you when I come back with it that it has the same integrity as if it had been in your system the whole time. So this is very akin to the physical world, where you can have a stock, you can have your stock in a company, for instance, expressed in a ledger book. But I could ask you to physicalize my stock. I could get a bearer certificate for that. And the guarantee that you want is when I bring it back to you, it has the same uniqueness in terms of anti-counterfeiting as if it had been in your book the whole time.